you've obviously invested a little bit into the esports platform with the Jinx platform and then with the FIFA. Is this directed towards the younger audience, particularly with your offerings?
Yeah, I think so. So, like most broadcasters, I think we've been wrestling with where does esports play in our world. It's not similar in some way to other sports because most of the activity and most of the consumption is taking place in the free environment, so Twitch and YouTube. But anywhere that is able to generate the kind of numbers that esports does and the passion and the interest from the audience is clearly of interest to us. So my own view, I think it's a sport. It's competitive gaming. It's a sport. I think where we have struggled is where do we play? You know, it's not. You wouldn't think this becomes a kind of linear TV experience where most of the audience is digital first and is consuming content on those platforms. So that said, we've done a few things. We've invested in a business called Jinx, which is it's more of a gaming channel than an esports provider. We've done various bits of broadcast. So we did some stuff with ESL on one of the Intel Masters. Actually, we broadcast on Sky 2, which is an entertainment channel rather than a sports channel. And we also broadcast the FIFA Interactive World Cup. So if you look at sort of how we've been trying to sort of approach this, one is it more of an entertainment proposition, test it in an entertainment environment, and what is the fit with our traditional sports audience? And that would be, you'd start with FIFA because that is where the football fans are. And when we broadcast that, the opinion was split down the middle. So you had a bunch of people going, have Sky lost the plot? They are broadcasting a computer game. Is this what I'm paying for? And you had exactly the other half of the audience going, this is amazing. I love Sky, that Sky is doing this. I want to see more of it. So I think for us, it's definitely something that we want to tap into because of the huge interest and the huge passion. It's about finding where it sits in our channels and how customers are going to pay for it and consume it.
I mean, we've had some interesting conversations with actual sports clubs who have esports teams underneath them. And there seems to be a very strong appetite for using the esports platform to learn about engagement on a social and a digital platform with youth. I mean, Andy, coming to yourself, you work with many rights holders. When it comes to cross-pollinating across different platforms, from taking broadcast content and reusing or creating new content, how do you advise people on engagement with youth?
I think that's something that's probably changed quite a lot, certainly in the last 5 or 6 years. I think certainly kind of video on social and digital platforms going back 5 or 6 years was largely regurgitated broadcast content. And I think one of the benefits of social and digital is the ability to get data and see what audiences are interested in, and that kind of the more traditional content of managers' press conferences, for example, on a Friday. I'd spent 10 years at the BBC. Every Friday we would have every Premier League manager talking, not dissimilar to a setup like this, in front of the press. And there was no interest at all. You know, we put all of this content on the BBC website because they always had done, and kind of it was the sort of content that would go out on broadcast. And there was just no appetite for it, and we could see that we would get daily figures on what people are watching, and they were far more interested in watching a video clip of Ian Dowie's phone going off live on Match of the Day because it was funny. It was kind of the content that they were wanting to consume on digital social channels. So I think that's changed a lot. I think there's still, broadcast and TV is still the big driver. It's what brings in the revenues, the production, I guess, standards of what you can get, sort of chopping that up and putting it onto digital and social is still very powerful. Yeah. But I think now people are looking to create content that is very specific for those audiences, and it's what people want. It's not the dry, we're looking forward to the next game, we'll take the positives out of that. It's really trying to get the more interesting content now.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking, and you were talking to me about the Lions tour, which is obviously very current at the moment, and you were saying above and beyond the amazing coverage that's being produced elsewhere, there's a lot of interest in the fan zone, there's a lot of interest in the pre-match, the post-match, and the multitude of platforms that we have available gives the opportunity to create content for everybody.
Yeah, and exactly, and we run the Lions social channels. You know, Sky have the rights in this country. You know, their role is to provide the live coverage, the highlights, the clips. You know, that's what they pay for. That's the destination that we try and drive people to.
Yeah.
I guess the Lions digital channels are to try and get new fans on board. Ultimately, they want people to watch it on Sky. They're not trying to drive people away from Sky. They're hopefully, you know, the sort of content that we're trying to provide is partly to the avid fan that wants even more. They want the behind the scenes. They want the personalities of the players, which the Lions can provide. But they also want the younger fans. They want to ensure that there's fans that are going to be watching it again in 4 years, in 8 years, in 20 years. So, and finding the balance between meeting the needs of the really avid rugby fan that's been following the Lions for 20, 30 years, that might want different content, to the 14-year-olds that maybe don't know about the history of the Lions. Maybe they haven't been taught that this is a massive sporting event that you need to watch this summer, because of the amount of content, because of the number of options that they now have. I think that side of it is probably getting a bit harder.
Yeah. And I think it's important not to forget, I mean, David, the revenues that Sky spends, or the money that Sky spends, fundamentally supports the sports that we all love. Without the rights, we would not have the Premier League stars, we would not have potentially the most competitive league in the world, and the content that is produced by Sky. If anyone remembers Division 1 football back in the day and Premiership before Sky got involved, the production qualities are beyond all recognition. So not only does Sky produce great content, but what's going on to say is that you also have a very active digital and social platforms. Yeah. I mean, many millions follow you.
Yeah, so I think so to what you can't take for granted is the customer and the expectations and demands of the customer. So I think, you know, from a sports fan's perspective, even a general content fan, whatever, you've never had so much choice. There have never been so many different places that you can go and consume content. And content at a time that suits you, in a format that suits you, that's targeted to your needs in the way that you, and the tone and the voice and everything else. So it's a brilliant time to be a sports fan, which is great for people like us, because we can do loads of cool stuff that talks to people in many, many different ways. But it also makes it harder for us to find the customer. So we have to work harder to make sure that Sky Sports is the destination of choice for all Lions content, rather than the Lions. Yeah, that is our objective. We don't just want to show the main event. We want to build a narrative around that event that makes sure that you keep coming back to us for more, and make sure that you tune in. So we've got a very, very big digital estate, and for some customers it's the first place that they come to engage with Sky Sports, particularly if you look at Sky Sports News. Sky Sports News is a very successful 24/7 sports news channel. Now, a 24/7 sports news channel doesn't exist in the same way that it did 15, 20 years ago, because what's the first thing when you lot roll out of bed? You pick your phone up and you're checking Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. You're not switching the TV on. So for many people, their first point of engagement with Sky is through a digital device, and we have to work a lot harder. Now, a lot of those experiences are free, and we're a premium TV broadcaster. So a lot of those experiences we use to build a story around the main event, really land the main event, and want to convince you to come back and watch more and subscribe to Sky in its many different forms. So yeah, huge digital estate that we use in many, many different ways.
And I remember when we were talking that you were saying that the Joshua Klitschko fight, through the activations on digital, you were able to extend it from a single night to over 2 weeks of content and coverage.
Yeah, so if anyone ever tells you that live sport is dead, go and watch that fight again, because that was an amazing event. And what the digital platforms allow us to do, not just our own platforms, but all of our distributed platforms, is make that event a 2-3 week event. And we can use all the tools and all the assets that we've got to bring that event alive. Ultimately, we want to sell more tickets. That is our job. But we're not doing that through a hard sell. We're doing that from using great content with great tools in many different environments.
From a sports point of view, though, they want more fans. And obviously, pay TV has the opportunity to provide huge amounts of revenue, but there is some limitations around reach. Does the merging of social platforms and digital platforms allow you to augment that and bring extra reach to sports? Yeah.
So we talk to a lot of non-Sky Sports and Sky subscribers within our digital estate. We don't have 40 million subscribers. We've got 40 million, 40 million reach of our own digital platforms. Add in social, and social is kind of pick a number and I can, you treble it. But so there are many ways for us to, one, extend the reach of sport. So if you look at kind of more, I hate using the word niche sports, but things like British netball and badminton and Euro Tour golf doesn't get the airtime that something like the Premier League does. But if we've got a reach of X million, we can take those sports to new fans in different places and talk to them in different ways. Ultimately, they want them to come back to Sky. But if you're a rights holder, the reach that we can now offer beyond the main TV platform is pretty phenomenal. And we are talking and we are targeting sports fans in their environment.
Do you feel that we'll see, I mean, this is generally to everyone here, do you feel that we'll see an acceleration of content being shared on multiple platforms simultaneously? Or do we feel that there'll be some barriers along the way? I mean, I've seen a broadcaster recently, one we worked with, who had a music event, a music festival in Poland. They couldn't share the music because the music was protected, but they had comedians in between the acts. Those comedian sketches reached over 67 million people, 9 million views. Poland's population is 37 million. I mean, that's from their brand's point of view, and they're a pay TV premium operator. They got to be exposed to a huge extra reach, and so did the content.
I mean, in esports content, what's interesting, I think the Premier League, the amount of hours in a season is 1,200 hours of live football. So far, 1.5 billion hours has been loaded onto Twitch. So most, I'd say, from the youth point of view, they don't really look at the old stuff. They want to see live action. So that's why Twitch has been so popular. And most people from the esports world are looking at competition so that they can improve themselves. So they might watch, two great teams playing, but actually they're seeing what the tricks or the techniques are. So, which is, I think, slightly different to sport on one level, that most people, watching a Super Bowl aren't probably playing American football, whereas in esports there's an education process. But because of the fragmentation issue, the great thing about Twitch is you can go there. I don't know if you look at Twitch, but you go on and immediately you can choose the game that you play or follow. You then go on and it breaks it down, and you can immediately see, well, look, someone, or 30,000 people, 50,000 people are watching that particular game match at that particular time. And the other thing that's fantastic is the engagement. So when you're watching the video, you're actually communicating live online, and other people can communicate with you. So for data and sponsors, it's an amazing platform, as opposed to kind of what I'd call more traditional. There's a kind of lack of this interaction, whereas the youth are used to that interaction.
So, I mean, you've obviously got the point there about participation, because before e-gaming came along, my idea was to kick a football and try and emulate Frank Stapleton or something like that for my sins. Nowadays, the youth is emulating their esports stars, and to a degree, the sports stars per se. But it's a question about either getting them back to core sports or back to the sports that they follow. And the question is then, from the sports side of things, what do they need to do? I mean, is it a question that they just use their primary rights owner as a channel, or do they look to experiment with their own platforms and their own OTT, Andy?
I think in terms of the kind of participation versus sat in front of a TV or watching it on your phone, I don't really feel like it's an either or. I think, when I was a kid, I'd watch Test cricket, and as soon as the lunch came on, I'd go in the garden and with friends and try and replicate it. And I don't think that's any different. I don't think esports is suddenly going to stop kids from playing football. I think there's, just in the UK, there are obviously issues with how much sport kids are doing, but I don't think you can blame computers for that, because we've had computers for quite a long time now. In some ways, maybe that's a way to get people into it. My kids are 7 and 4, and will watch something on YouTube and be more interested in that because they've seen it on YouTube. And I'm not going to get them to sit down and watch 8 hours of Test cricket a day. That's not a way to get them into the sport. They're going to be more likely to get into the sport by seeing something amazing that an England cricketer did, whether that's the T20 smashing the ball out of the ground, but probably more likely doing something quite quirky, or them appearing on esports on a game show, or playing FIFA against, you know, a rugby player or whatnot.
So can I answer that? I mean, so I fundamentally disagree that young people are falling out of love with sports. But you probably say you would say that because my job depends on it. But the way that they follow and watch sports, to your point, has changed massively. And you know, the idea of us thinking, are they going to come and sit down and watch, you know, a 5-day test match, or they're going to come and watch every single Liverpool game, has changed. You know, I sit on the board of a company called Whistle Sports, which is the biggest youth sports media business in the world. They don't own any destinations and they don't own any rights. What they do is work with creators in the sports space to target an audience that is 95% under 24. People like the F2 Freestylers, people like Dude Perfect. The F2 Freestylers, it's freestyle football. You know, huge, massive following. Dude Perfect do trick shots, even bigger following. Brodie Smith does extreme frisbee, even bigger following. So they, for a lot of young people, that is what they associate with sports. You know, they follow stars. They'll follow Messi. Why do you follow Messi? Do you support Barcelona? No, because I play him on FIFA. You know, I run a under-8s football team. Christmas came and there was 15 kids in front of us. 11 of them had on Real Madrid and Barcelona shirts because they play as Ronaldo or Messi on FIFA. So they're not falling out of love with sports. The way that they consume and follow and watch sports has changed massively. And as a business like ours, we kind of need to address that. But we also don't want to forget that, you know, our core customers are those guys who sit there and watch 5 days of Test cricket. And my dad is quite happy to pay for a Sky Q subscription and sit there in front of a 40H TV, and he loves it. And we should never ignore that. But I think the range of different ways that people are consuming sports has changed a lot, and it's hugely exciting. And just to watch it change and the speed at which it does is phenomenal. But young people still love sports.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so a great example. So FIFA technically is a sports video game, as opposed to, you know, EA Sports don't actually call it an e-sport, they call it a sports video game, and it's not in the top 10 kind of esports from popularity. It is popular in Europe. But an interesting example was there was a football coach where some kids came along and said, I was playing FIFA last night and I did this trick. I'd really like to learn it in reality. So again, we're not trying to take anything away from that. We're about promoting it. But there's an esport game called Rocket League where you play 3 versus 3 playing football, but you're using rocket-powered cars. And it is an incredible game because you're playing as a team of 3 against another team of 3, and you're learning about angles and defense and attack. And that, you know, football's very lucky that it's got FIFA and it's got Rocket League. And you know, I'm talking to a few you know, rights holders at the moment about how their sports can get more engaged with esports. It just happens that FIFA and there's a game called Pro Evolution Soccer, PES, you know, there's 2 or 3 really good sports video games that actually is capturing, you know, that youth market.
Okay. And then, again, are we likely to see this accelerating? I mean, sports are having to evolve. I mean, golf is now talking about doing a 12-hole tournament. You've got limited over cricket. You've got numerous sports having to evolve their offering. Is this reflective of youth's lack of attention span?
No, I mean, some of the esports games can last up, a match can last up to 4 hours. So, you know, depending on, so the fighter games, you know, 90-second bouts, a bit like in boxing. You know, when you get to the elite level, you know, you play the best of 5 matches, and the, you know, winners of 3, and every match is different. So it depends if you're talking about at the elite level or at the grassroots level. You know, and again, it really does depend on the game. And you know, the one in the UK that's very popular is Call of Duty, which is a shooter game. And you know, just an interesting fact that I talked about from content point of view. You know, for me, Star Wars, Bond were, you know, massive media moments for me. For my son, when Black Ops 3 came out, it did $500 million sales in its opening weekend, and that was his media moment with his mates at school, and they've grown together playing that. And each year there's a different iteration of this game. So this year in November it's coming out. It's World War II, and I'm just really, I would really, you know, hope it does well. But I'm trying to understand that, you know, my son, who's born in 2000, has only been playing first-person shooter games that is real, you know, terrorists at the moment. So will he basically have an affinity to World War II? Will he want to do the authentic guns as opposed to the modern guns? So it's really interesting that you'll then start getting traditional esports, and that's what started happening. So StarCraft is a classic game, but you know, Overwatch has only been out a year, and that's one of the, you know, it's the top 5 game now. It's a team rating game. So you will start, I think, getting even more fragmentation.
Okay. As social and media, or social and mobile really, what do we all see as the opportunities to offer it as a complementary channel around broadcast media? And is this an area where sports and brands should be focused in the near term?
So the last part of that question, sports and brands and all media companies can't close their eyes to what's happening on social channels, because when, you know, what is it, 80% of mobile advertising, maybe less, 60-70% of mobile advertising sits with two channels, and 60% of time on a mobile device is spent in 4 apps, one of which is Facebook, one of which is probably Instagram, maybe Twitter if you're lucky, or Snapchat. You kind of have to be there. What isn't happening at the moment is the value coming back to content owners and media brands in the way that you would hope it would do. I think there are a lot of tools there that these channels are making available to help us do that. But I think at the moment it's a complementary medium to what we do. We do a lot of Facebook Lives. We do Twitter Amplify, which is publishing real-time clips into Twitter. We're a partner on Snapchat Discover, so if you look at our content on there, it doesn't feel like Sky Sports content. It feels like content that's produced by Snapchat. It's produced by guys who are all under 24. So we are heavily in that space because we feel that that's where we need to go and talk to the audience. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are including the Sky message and telling them about all the great things that are on and happening with Sky.
And then obviously they need to differentiate content across the different platforms. But who should be doing it? Should it be expert creators such as yourself? Should it be using the primary broadcast channel to then drive the message further out? Or should they be engaging with perhaps the athletes who frequently have bigger followings than everybody?
Definitely us, I think.
That was a loaded question.
I think all of the above, really. I think we work for probably 15 to 20 different sports organisations that sometimes have a big team in-house that is very capable of producing content. We have others that have no capacity, so that's why they bring us in, and everything in between. But then, on top of that, you mentioned athletes, whether it's kind of athletes that they not so much own, but kind of feel are their athletes, or whether that's the one of the big trends is influencers, particularly if, pretty much across the board, all of these sports organisations want to get to younger audiences, new audiences. So pulling in people from the music industry, entertainment, from esports, from all sorts, is quite an easy, potentially very easy way of getting to a very big new audience. So I think you have to look at all of these options and see what's possible and how you make the most of it.
Okay. And then within digital and within mobile and social to a degree, I think picking up on the point David made, that the returns aren't there at the moment. But if we go back and we look at web and we look at app-based, it's important sports and organisers now grow their audience, because this is what they'll monetize in the future. So have we seen examples where good operators are investing now for returns in the future, or is it all about return now, David?
So both, really. I think you've seen a lot of businesses build their destinations and audiences off the back of social channels. So a lot of these digital native companies have done that. Some have done it well. So if you look at something like BuzzFeed, a phenomenal business that has built itself entirely off the back of social and created its own way of monetizing that everyone now follows, which is called native advertising. They invented that. And there are other platforms that have taken VC's money, brought an audience on social, and tried to create their own destination, and actually realised that they can't figure out why everyone comes to their platforms once, then disappears and never comes back again. Well, guess what? You brought them off social. They were on a social channel. They came to you and really liked what they saw. So I think there are you're going to see a few of those drop away. But I think from our perspective, we are there for the long term, because it's not cheap and it's not easy, and as these guys will know, to manage all of these platforms in different ways. Not only is the audience different and the behaviour of the audience different, actually the way that you produce and manage content is completely different. Someone say I want video in square, someone say I want it in vertical, someone say I don't want video, or you can't run pre-rolls, or you can run mid-rolls, or it's kind of the cost and the resource in actually doing that properly, if you want to do it credibly, is not cheap, which is why guys like these exist. So I think there are some that will fall away. There are some that will survive and will make a decent business out of it.
Okay. Starting to head towards the end, but a couple of questions. These are general ones. So I guess the brands that struck out for me that have really gone out on their own would be Wimbledon, the NFL, the NBA, all of which have now even moved beyond replicating content and have gone insofar as creating their own content and their own digital content. Is this something that we'll see in the case of NFL and NBA coming over to Europe more and more? I mean, the deals that particularly stick out were the Twitter deal this year, where they created unique content around Monday Night Football, which I thought was very interesting. And then obviously Amazon took over the Thursday night deal. Is this something which is a US-centric thing, or do we think that we'll see that in the UK?
I think generally things, the US have generally been ahead of the UK, I think, in the sports market. I think the NFL and the NBA you mentioned are probably the two trailblazers, I think, in terms of digital and social. I think they've took the view that you build the audience up, and the benefits of that, whether that's in terms of trying to get revenue from that particular audience, or because of the other revenues that will come by having these massive fans overseas. I think Wimbledon's a great example in terms of the UK, in terms of for several years now they've invested in digital and social, not I think specifically to earn more revenue, but to increase their global reach, to get to a younger audience, and I think ultimately down the line, if not already, they will start seeing returns on that. I think.
What's interesting to me, so the NBA have an esports league, so 50% of the clubs have an esports team playing their game, and then there's a game called Madden. EA Sports is a great American football game, so again, they're reaching out to probably younger audiences, staying relevant and doing brand extensions by people playing the game first and then probably bring them in. And what's interesting is that the esports conversations we're having is actually using esports as a great fan base or a fan zone activity at traditional sports. So as much as kids like watching parents drinking Guinness, wouldn't it be great to have an activity that the kids are really engaged with, and then you're collecting all their data at the same time. So from a digital point of view, they're doing it. I think with Wimbledon, it's tougher because there isn't actually a good esports tennis game type thing. So I know I'm a member at Wimbledon, so I know quite a lot what's going on there. But it's interesting that they're really reviewing esports. They haven't quite got the strategy right yet.
And data is obviously one of the real value exchanges in terms of social. I mean, that does provide organisations, sports organisations, broadcasters and associations with huge data from which to then develop their offering, develop their personalisation, and that's something where when you cross it across broadcast and media, there's huge value exchange.
Yeah, I think so. So two things with data. One, clearly there is a huge opportunity, and there are many places that you can collect and pull data from. The bigger challenge that most people see is actually what to do with it. Once you've got it, what do you actually do with it, and where does it drive value? And I think if you in a world where a sports fan has lots and lots of choice, sometimes that can paralyze them. So actually, I think where people begin to win is where they're able to use the data and the profile they've got of that sports fan or user and start to personalise it and make it much more targeted to me and my sports experiences. Because I think if you look at the social channels, you're one of a million providers in a news feed, and it's very hard to bring your content up to the fore. If you can own that, not own the customer, if you can get the customer to your own destination, you can start delivering them a much more targeted experience where it's a sports environment they're in and it's sports all around them rather than all of this other noise, because you're not just competing against other sports and other broadcasters and other media companies, you're actually competing for people's time. Yeah, that's more than what it is now. You sit there, everyone disappears down a Twitter wormhole or a Facebook wormhole, turn the TV on, you realise you've been there 2 hours, you haven't even looked at it because you've been messing around on your phone. Yeah, that's time. That's just time that people are spending doing that with a multitude of things, and we've got to, that is effectively what we're competing against.
We're time poor if we're talk poor of anything at the moment. Yeah, choice rich and time poor.
Yeah.
So just one thing. So we work with the Premier League clubs as well, and the top 6 clubs have got 250 million Facebook fans. And the challenge for them again is this interaction. And I think just saying what can you do with the data? And I think obviously I'm passionate about esports, but there's always a play that if you've got fans that are doing an activity where they can actually either support their club or represent their club and stuff like that. And I think what you'll see with brands is the engagement of the data will be actually through their activities as well, outside their traditional sport. And I think there'll be a big play in that in the next year. Yeah.
And touching on the Premier League, I mean, however advanced the US is in certain creative fields, the Premier League's rights negotiations are possibly should be held up as an example to everybody. I mean, they've monetised it beyond all recognition. They now have exposure in pretty much every English-speaking and football playing market in the world.
And EA Sports is their main sponsor.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so just to give the audience a couple of takeaway points. So from a creative point of view, Andy, if you were working with a new client, what are the 2 things across OTT, social or mobile that you would be advising them are the must-considers at this point?
I think we try and take everyone back to business objectives and audience. And as much as it's nice to create great content and some of the stuff that we're producing, some of the stuff that we see elsewhere, is great to see animation. It's great to see what people are now doing with video in terms of graphics and whatnot, and campaigns. I think it's very easy to go out and spend a load of money on some nice content, but I think understanding where you want to go, what do you want to do with your organisation, and then working out how you use digital and social to get there. And ultimately, who's your audience, existing audience, but also target audience. Not sexy, I'm afraid, but...
I'm afraid not. David, obviously as probably Europe's premier broadcaster, you've got a multi-platform offering to your rights that you're buying in. You're one of the biggest buyers of rights. What is it that the multi-platform offering enables you to do that a few years ago that you couldn't do?
So I think, main one is that it allows us to, actually I'll take you back to a customer's perspective. So if you're a customer, 10 years ago, we've been in the digital game a long time, 10 years ago, if you wanted to consume the content that you were paying for, you had to be sitting down in your living room at a certain time of the day to watch it. You don't have to do that anymore. And I think there are, as a customer, you're demanding content in more and more different places. You're demanding content to be presented to you in a way that you're familiar with the channel that you're consuming it in, if that makes sense. And you want choice as to how you're going to access it. And I think, for us, that's, in one hand, a huge opportunity because we can create even better products and services that allow us to do that. But at the same time, we need to be aware that the customer has a lot more choice, and we just need to work a lot harder to make sure that we are the brand that they choose to consume sports with.
And Chester, I guess, from a customer's point of view, what unique offerings does esports, e-gaming bring to brands who may want to reach a youth audience or a younger audience?
Yeah, I think that the complexity of esports is a challenge for sponsors, and I speak to a lot of brands. What game do you choose? But I'd say engage, have a look. There's an event at the end of this month at Wembley Arena. There'll be about 5,000 people watching it. It's a company called ECS that do a great job. Just go to an event, see the demographic, and just think of esports not as a threat, but something that you could do as a complement, is what I'd say. So it's there. It's only going to get bigger. Everyone laughs. It's a 400 million person niche, but so just, and also if you've got children or friends playing the games, just understand what games they're playing. We're going to be working hard on educating people that certain games are much better for you than, let's say, playing chess. And as I say, you'd never have a parent saying you're playing too much chess. So.
Okay, so we've got 3 minutes left, so perhaps we can open it up to a few questions from the audience.
will we? So question for David. Oh, that's a microphone. Question for David more than anything really, I suppose, is EFL is doing something a bit esports next year with its broadcasting rights. It's kind of saying we've got this thing called EFL Digital. We don't have much of an audience internationally for Grimsby versus whoever, so we'll broadcast it ourselves in a very fragmented sort of way. It's going to be a bit like Twitch. Are you worried that actually they might just skip out the broadcasters in the end and say, well, let's do it ourselves?
So a rights holder will make the decision that makes economic sense for them, right? So I can't comment on what a rights holder will do. I think that the EFL product for next year, so it's targeting overseas customers only. So if you're a Norwich fan and you live overseas, you can watch all the Norwich games that aren't being broadcast, which will probably be quite a lot. So I think for a small audience overseas, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. It's not new. They've been running bet and watch services in overseas markets for some time. But look, I think I think a rights holder will decide on what distribution they want based on what makes economic sense. I think it's not much of an answer, I know, but that's my answer.
Any other questions from the audience? Question here. Actually, could you say your name and obviously address which panellist you're asking the question?
Thanks. My name's Johnny Murch from Red Torch. It's a question for Chester. Really. At Red Torch, we're really interested in the sort of convergence between e-gaming, e-sports, and actual participation that we've touched on earlier in the conversation, and we're seeing it in cycling these days with Zwift, with people on their turbo trainers in their garage, pounding away, but actually competing against others all around the world in the same race. And I read an article this morning about the head of EA talking about the future of, you can see a future of e-gaming where people playing football on the pitch have got wearables, and the amount that they run around the pitch actually translates into power in an e-gaming environment. So I wanted to ask you, from based on your understanding of the audience of esports and e-gaming, do you think there is the potential for that to develop further and develop quite quickly?
So esports technically is things that you can't do in reality. So what EA are doing, they've got sports video games. So, and as I say, FIFA and PES are not really in the top 10. So I don't know if you play esports, but when you can jump 100 meters or run 2,000 miles an hour, it's much more exciting than doing something that you're limited to in reality. So I think there will be a demand for it. It's just not as exciting, as engaging as esports. So I think it's great, and I know that there's a guy up in Aylesbury that encourages Wii Sports. So if the weather's bad, you can at least do some physical activity. But I think that you need to understand that doing a sports video game is very different to esports, which is teams of 5 playing on strategy, communicating together, doing things you can't do in reality.